you for joining today, everyone. We might still have some attendees join over the next couple of minutes, but we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Tink Perozak, and we also have Fuyo Watanabe as your hosts for today. We started the Calgary Tableau user group probably over a decade ago, perhaps about 12 years ago now. I'm going to keep my introductions very brief at the start of the meeting and offer up some more information after our second speaker today, just to move things along in the first hour of the meeting so that some other commitments can be met. So I wanted to introduce quickly Shah Gill from Tableau, who will be our first speaker, and we'll be talking a bit about Tableau highlights. And then we'll have Dmitry and Anshin from Microsoft, who will be talking about Tableau on Snowflake data platform. And then we'll have, I'll have a break in there where Fuyo and I will talk and offer up some information on a few different things. And then we'll conclude with Carter Edie from Chatter's Limited Partnership, and he'll be talking about data change management. So without further ado, just because of our timing in this meeting, I'm going to hand it over to Shah Gill to introduce the Tableau highlights.
All right, thank you for the intro, and I'm excited to talk to you all about some of my favorite new features in 2020.3 and also 2020.4. Let's start with 2020.3. Lots of cool stuff to see in the desktop space, server space, and also prep, which is very exciting, and we can get right into it. So if you like working with spatial data, you're gonna love this. So now we can officially union spatial data files. So if you've ever been in a situation in the past where you haven't found the right spatial data, maybe it's broken up into smaller parts. For example, maybe you have California shapefile and you also have a separate Texas shapefile. It's hard to work with both of them at the same time, but now just like unioning any other type of data, you can also do that with spatial files and have more holistic geometry to work with. So if you love spatial data like me, this is super exciting, and it just enables so many more use cases. Next, we have just a couple of relationship improvements. We have an inequality operator. It's pretty self-explanatory, but it wasn't there before. It's there now for you to use, and yeah, make use of it. It's definitely useful, I find. Next, in the predictive space, this is also very cool. So we have two new functions called model quantile and model percentile. And it's using the same engine as explaining data. And you can see here in that screenshot, right, we're creating a predictive calculation based on the average, quantity, discount, segment, and region. And these are now available to you as well in 2020.3. Next, for parameter actions, you can actually set what happens when you clear the parameters, and you can manually set the value whenever you clear a selection, which is also cool. Data quality warning. So if you have the data management add-on, you're probably used to creating data quality warnings on Tableau server itself. And that's helpful for that downstream experience, right? The admin or the data steward, they create a warning about the data. And when you access a dashboard, or if you look at the external assets page, you can see that warning as well. But now you can see it upstream as well. So when you're connecting to data in Tableau Desktop, you can also see that exact same warning and the note displayed there as well. So it's helping not only downstream, but the upstream experience as well. This one, very self-explanatory. We have the new in operator for calculations, as you can see here. The in, this is the new guy right here.
Oh my God, finally.
I know, right? I can't believe we didn't have it before, but it's here now, so make use of it. So whenever you found yourself in the past going through an upgrade of Tableau, you may have noticed that the next time you open up Tableau Desktop, you see that big blank box. So there's no more of that. All your recent workbooks, all that content will appear here now post-upgrade as well. dynamic parameters and data source refresh. So you can now click F5 on the desktop. Everyone's used to that, which is cool. There's also a context menu to refresh, and also on the toolbar itself on Tableau Online or Tableau Server, you'll see a new refresh button as well. Let's talk about server and subscriptions on the server. Before, you couldn't really do this, but now you can specify that when you create a new subscription, you can do it every time the data refreshes as well. So you don't have to wait and try to time the data refresh to create a subscription. You can just specify on the subscription window itself that send out this to somebody's email every time the data refreshes. And a new shared with me page. So next time when someone shares a visit with you, in addition to getting an email, you can also view it in the new shared with me page, right? So gone are those days where you have to go through your emails, see what people have sent you. You have this option on the Tableau server menu now where you can see everything that's been shared with you as well. This is more for the server admins on the call. You may have found it kind of odd in the past where someone had to sign in first and then you can grant their site role. But now you can add the user whenever you want, and you can specify that which role they will automatically be applied upon sign in. So automatic suspension of extract refreshes for stale workbooks. So if you have something on your Tableau server, a workbook, and no one's accessed it in the last 30 days, well, 30 days is the default setting and it's configurable, but if no one's accessed it within the last 30 days, we will suspend that extract refresh. So it will save your system resources as well. And of course, if you're an admin, you can configure this feature as well. And probably one of the biggest features of 2020.3 is for Tableau Prep. And now you're probably used to creating an output file as an actual file or publish the data source to the server. And in addition to that, we're now enabling you to write back to a database. Again, this helps with a lot of new use cases upstream. If you have data science systems already hooked up to those databases, well, you can now publish that data, that clean data, back up to those database tables directly, and it will enhance that workflow that you already had. Again, if you are a customer of data management add-on, you're used to seeing that external assets page. And in the event that you did have, duplicate tables or any external asset, you can now group them up just to have that more clean interface as well.
Shah, we have a question about, are these upgrades on just the Enterprise Edition or are they on all versions?
All versions.
That's good. I don't even know what the different editions are anymore these days.
And this is actually a jam-packed release. So I just went through a couple of my favorite features, which are, high value, but there's also a lot more packed in this release. And I will provide these slides to somebody like Tinkle or whoever who can distribute this to everybody here. But there's a jam-packed release, lots of other smaller line items as well. So that's 2020.3 in a nutshell. And let's talk about 2020.4, which is equally as exciting, in my opinion. Again, all the changes stretch across the desktop to the server and also prep. And we'll start off in the same way. I mean, I absolutely love working with spatial data, and I'm so excited when I see these kind of features. So now we're talking about marks layers for maps. So if you're used to using spatial data in the past, you're probably used to that dual access trick to get more than one layer of marks onto the canvas. Well, you don't have to do that little hack anymore. You can bring in as many mark layers as you want, as long as they come from the same data source. So in this picture, you can see this is hurricanes in Florida, and you can see the different puppy shelters and also pepper stores, and you can add even more and more and more marks onto that same viz. So I actually did talk about this in 2020.3. The only difference here is that when you're searching for data in regards to data quality warnings, when you're connecting to data sources on the server, this little window pops up and you can see all the data sources available to you on Tableau server. And again, in that whole upstream experience, you can also see any data quality warnings that have been set on the server data sources in Tableau desktop as well. This is really cool. So if your data is robust enough, with the click of a button, you can extend a time axis into the future and it'll build a predictive experience for you. And it'll extend that line, extend that axis for you just by going into here and click extend axis. This is just more about the block comments. So whenever you have a calculation or parameter, you could have put comments in the past, but now just to conform with that C experience, you can also do block comments as well. When you're on the web, if you're an explorer or a creator as well, and you're on the web, you click the web edit. You can also now create sets directly on the web. So you can select all the marks that you want and create a set. What's different here is that in Tableau Desktop, you would have additional dialogues pop up when you do this, but on the web, it'll automatically create the set, rename it for you, and also have it selected by default. So this dialog did not exist in the web edit. So now you can easily apply filters to all worksheets on the web. And of course, being on the web, it's also accessible by keyboard as well. And just like Tableau Desktop, exact same thing when you're creating an extract, connecting to data on the web, you can specify if you want it to be live or an extract in the browser. This one's really cool. You can add a lot more labels to your marks in the viz on the web. Things like labeling just the end of the line, labeling just the minimum and maximum values, or labeling only the selected portion of the line, etc. So lots of new label controls for you to put on the web as well. If you leverage Ask Data and you're a site admin, this is a really cool way for you to understand how people are using Ask Data. Which queries are the top queries? Which users are asking the most questions in Ask Data? How many users are using it? Number of data sources that are implicated by Ask Data, etc. So it really gives you that view to how people are using it and how to improve that experience over time as well. Also, related to data quality warnings, in addition to setting them, seeing them downstream, seeing them upstream, your admins can also now see the history of all the warnings on the server or site as well. Which ones are currently active, which ones have been there in the past, and etc. Again, another major improvement for prep, you can now use Tableau Prep in the browser. And it's there for everybody. You don't necessarily need data management to use Tableau Prep. It's there for everybody in the browser now. And again, for those customers with data management, you're probably used to seeing that lineage pane on the right. You could have seen all the data sources implicated, workbook sheets and owners. But now metrics is also rolled into the lineage and you can see the different metrics associated to the content that you're inspecting. And again, this is also a jam-packed release. There's just so many more little line items here. And again, we'll provide this deck to you. If you have any questions about any of these, just feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to talk about that further. And that's 2020.4.
What's the target release date for these
They're already out.
versions? They're out already?
Yep, these are released. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. And that's it. Thanks for having me here, and I look forward to attending the next one as well.
Thanks very much, Shah. We really appreciate you taking the time to show us the 2020.3 and 2020.4 new functionality. I know there's definitely a few there that caught my attention, those mark layers and the
Exactly,
creating the extracts in the browser, the Ask data usage, and the Tableau Prep in the browser.
Yep, huge.
Yeah. Excited about some of that. Thanks again.
No problem.
So we'll move on. Welcome to the new folks that have attended in the last little bit here. Appreciate your attendance. We are going to do a little bit of an intro after our second speaker today, after Dmitry. So look forward to that, and we'll talk a little bit more about the draw for the e-learning subscription, etc. So, but just to move through the first part of the meeting, I want to go ahead and introduce Dmitry Anshin. And he's going to talk about Tableau on Snowflake. So welcome, Dmitry. Thanks very much for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Tink. Yeah, I'm Dmitry and happy to present today. And I will talk about Snowflake and Tableau. So mostly from point of view of data engineer. And I used to work with Snowflake, with Redshift. Now I'm more focused on Databricks. And all of those tools, they usually connected with Tableau. So really like Tableau as a BI tool, just enjoying work there. So, I'm going to share my screen. I think this one. So, and I will start my presentation. I will stop the video. Yeah, the topic, very simple, Tableau and Snowflake. So, and I will talk more about Snowflake than in Tableau, but also I have a demo, so hopefully it will work. Yeah, this short slide about myself. I did writing for books. I participate in writing of the books, so the bunch of them. Also, I like to present different user groups, and currently I work with Microsoft in Vancouver. So right now I'm in Vancouver, but most of the time I was on Vancouver Island before. And before Microsoft, I was working for Amazon. So now in Microsoft, I'm doing very interesting things. So I'm part of Microsoft Gaming and doing analytics for the games. So I don't know if you know particular Gears of War. So this is my title, and here I built the data platform to basically collect the games analytics, then bring some Xbox data or PC data like telemetry data, and doing analytics on top of this with machine learning, BI, dashboards, all those things. So very interesting. This is new for me, so I learned about how the game industry is using the data. Okay, what's about data? So it's obvious for everyone, the data right now is like big change. What we had previously, maybe 10 years ago, with mostly traditional database. Now we have big systems. We have lots of data applications that generates the data, like, and we could talk about like terabytes is like average size of the data storage is like terabytes for typical organization, but some organizations are even running on petabytes. And the data is not only structured, it could be semi-structured, it could be unstructured like voice and video. And previously we talked about batch, then we deliver data once a day. Now we can stream the data in real time and we can compute this. And of course, the huge advantage we got with the cloud. So the cloud vendors like AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, they all helps us to focus more on the problems we solve than focusing how like we need to buy hardware, how to set up and running your own data center. So now you can start using the virtual resources. Same for Tableau, you can just, instead of buying the physical server, you can rent virtual machines in the cloud and deploy a Tableau server. Or you can even run Tableau online. So this is the cloud. So this is how simple right now. Couple clicks and you get your solution. And now you can load the data and do your work. This is just traditional data warehouse. I want to quickly cover some historical slides to give you understanding what is Snowflake, just on the example, what we had before. Before we have the single database that's usually bigger than others, and it was specifically designed for analytical queries. And usually we collect data with ETL tools from transactional databases. And then we have our BI tools on top. Here is an example of Microsoft reporting service and Excel spreadsheets. So this is how it was maybe 10 years ago. But some organizations still have the same architecture. Another term that I want to cover, the difference between ETL and ELT. This is very applicable for the cloud data platform, cloud data warehousing, you can call it anyway. The idea here with traditional approach, with ETL, you need additional, for example, host or server or virtual machine where you can install your application. Where you can install your application, and this application will process your data, physically read all the data you have. For example, if we talk about Tableau Prep, maybe it's not the enterprise-grade ETL tool, but it has similar ideas. So you can use this tool to extract data, to transform and load. Now you can write it. So you basically can write it into another data warehouse, or even before you can just write into CSV file. So the T was happening inside Tableau Prep, and you can feel it. If you have a huge file, you can feel how your machine is slowed down, then read the file. In the cloud, it's opposite. We prefer to use ELT. The idea is simple. We want to take our raw data, for example, files or whatever, and we want to push down them into the data warehouse. For example, if we talk about Redshift, if we want to store data in Redshift, we want to take the files, put them into Amazon storage S3, and then copy them inside the Redshift. And as a result, we don't need to read rows and process one by one, do inserting. We can just millions of rows load simultaneously into Redshift storage. And same for any other cloud data warehouse. That's the biggest difference. About data warehousing, there are two common technologies. One is SMP, symmetric multiprocessing. And you can think about this. This is SQL Server, MySQL, Postgres. This is just standalone database. And another one is MPP, massive parallel processing. And for reference, I did the picture of the washing machine. So you can have single washing machine, or you have multiple washing machines. And you can think, oh, we have lots of laundry, and we can either use single machine and wait when it's finished work, and then we can add extra laundry, or we can run our queries in parallel. So works faster and better. And this is how typically nowadays all cloud data warehouse set up, they MPP. So there are several nodes, they work together. And of course, there are some trade-offs, because if you have multiple machines and you want to save data across several nodes, you need to split this data, and you could easily skew the data. And you need to additionally collect the statistics and some other stuff. And I think that one of the first MPP data warehouse was Teradata, probably in the 80s. So in other term, opposite to data warehouse is the data lake. The data lake usually just the file storage that was introduced with the rise of Hadoop in probably like 2011, 2012. Then we can store raw files, and then we can read those files. And this is very good example that you can think. So on iPhone, then you make the picture. This picture could saved in iCloud Drive. And iCloud Drive is a kind of like data lake that store the pictures, the raw files, while it's uploading to the Apple Drive, Apple Cloud. It processes the file, gets some metadata. What is it, where the picture was done, what's the file size, and so on. And then you, in your phone, you can go to Photo app, and you can search by keywords, some fire, and you will use metadata. and you will get your pictures with fires. So it's kind of like business glossary and Surface BI tool. Then you can type whatever you want and you get the pictures. But the idea here, you have raw files that's saved into some storage as the files, and then you can get access to them. And this is the small table that compare Delta Lake and Data Warehouse. So usually those technology, they complementary. So traditionally we run Data Warehouse. It's very convenient, has SQL, and this is how we used to work. And if we have some advanced cases, we have lots of data, then probably we need to switch to Delta Lake. We need to stop big data systems. And again, with cloud, it's way easy to do, because if we talk about Azure, we can have our, for example, Azure SQL database or Azure Synapse as data warehouse, and then we can optionally leverage Azure Data Lake. And there are interfaces to run the SQL queries against our data. So
Dmitry,
yes.
can I interrupt you for a second? We have a question about the parallel processing slide.
Okay. Yes.
Can you read the?
Yeah, I can. How do you schedule the ops in case where one purpose depends on that? Yeah, those questions about how those things works in data warehouse, they're valid questions, but I just don't want to really pause on those questions, because it's not the major topic. I just trying to go through like 10 years of history, how like company set up the data analytics and some key points.
Yeah,
so
this is pretty detailed stuff.
I couldn't answer this just very simply. Probably it's more like discussion, go deeper. That's why, yeah, I happy maybe later to chat about this, but for now I just keep it. So
No problem.
this picture I grabbed actually from Databricks documentations. So then you probably heard about Databricks and Delta Lake. But the idea here, okay, we had our traditional data warehouse in 80s, then we introduced the data lakes, and then we talk about modern data lake. The benefits versus data warehouse, that you decouple, and this is the keyword, you decouple your storage, where you store your data, from your computing clusters. So because storage is cheap, compute is expensive. And with traditional data warehouse, even like MPP, those analytical, usually if you need storage, you will pay for compute, because compute storage is just a single machine. It's like server that has compute and storage. You need more storage, you will get more compute, and you will gonna pay for this. And with decoupling of storage and compute, now you can save a lot on compute, because if you don't need to write the queries, there is no activity, you're not running, you're not paying. But data storing in this file storage, and that's it. So very convenient. But it has some limitations against how you're gonna to leverage those ACID, those like consistency, how you make sure that your data not broken, how you can write to the same file in parallel. Like there are some valid questions that basically is a challenges then you run data lake. And now we talk a lot about cloud data platform. So the cloud data platform it could be Redshift, it could be Synapse, it's BigQuery, it's Snowflake, and we will talk more about Snowflake. So yeah, Snowflake versus what? And Amazon Redshift, I think last year they introduced new node types array-free. This is the first time Redshift decouple storage and compute. Previously, they had the options with Redshift Spectrum. This is technology that can help you to decouple kind of like I can leverage my data lake with Redshift Spectrum to query it, and then I have Redshift cluster. Now they completely decouple your computing nodes from your storage and in Delta Lake. Azure Synapse recently make available out of the beta, and previously they call it SQL Data Warehouse. And this is also decouple your storage and compute, the Google BigQuery, and then the Databricks with Delta Lake. But again, I will talk today and we'll show you Snowflake. But this is just, there is no the best technology out of the market. You can do your solution using any of those technologies. It's more depends on your requirements. The cloud services. This is, if you never work with the cloud, I really suggest you to start, because looks like everything moving to the cloud. And I think the cloud is the same knowledge, just the basic knowledge of cloud is important as the knowledge of SQL, even if you build the dashboards. So you need to understand how the database works, how the SQL query, for example, you need to debug or write your own. So the cloud services, in traditional way, then we do not use cloud. We call it, we use something on premise. For example, we run Tableau desktop on premise. We can install Tableau server in our local data center. It will be on premise. But now we can think about what other options available for us in the cloud, and there are 3 of them. And this is very nice picture. Let's simplify. And on the pizza example, we'll tell what's the difference. So it's infrastructure as a service. You can think about this. Okay, I don't want to buy the server. I can rent some virtual machines in the cloud, but I'm responsible to do everything. So with the pizza, you can rent the kitchen, gas, and oven, but you're still responsible to build your pizza. In Tableau example, you can rent the virtual machine, virtual server, but you're responsible to do updates, and you're responsible to install Tableau. The next step is a platform as a service. So in this case, you covered with more things. In pizza example, they give you the pizza dough, and then you decide, okay, what toppings I want to put on my pizza. In Tableau world, I don't know, the Tableau Online, it could be software as a service, and I think it's more software as a service, because with Tableau Online, you don't need to do anything at all. So, but for example, Redshift Data Warehouse, it's platform as a service. So with one click, or a couple clicks, you could get running your data warehouse. You don't need to install anything. You basically start writing your data into your data warehouse. And the last one is software as a service. Basically, you can order pizza and they will bring pizza for you. You don't need to do anything at all. The same with Tableau Online. So you can just sign up and you can start to work with Tableau. And the Snowflake is the different from other vendors that I showed you previously. That is software as a service. They even call it data warehouse as a service. And I think they the first who did this, like who used word data warehouse as a service. It means that out of the box, since you sign up, you can start using this, and you don't need to think about many things. You don't need like even admin. Of course, it's not 100% true, but it's way better than in other data warehouse vendors. And those pictures I found from Snowflake documentation. This is data zones perspective by Snowflake. Again, if you look to data warehouse, you can define several zones. For example, starting from the raw data, then you can just put your data as is out of the source. Then you can do some cleaning of those data, and we can call it confirmed data. And then we can actually start to working on data modeling. For example, we can leverage dimensional modeling. We can build data marts, and then eventually we'll connect our BI tool like Tableau. So if we will think in the way of data lake versus data warehouse, so we can split our raw data, and maybe we even can process our raw data, make it confirmed data. It can live in data lake, but then we can build our data model, leverage the SQL, dimensional modeling, and then we'll start to using data warehouse, and we can build our data marts. And those data marts, this is basically the things that you usually connect with Tableau if you have data warehouse in your organization. So the idea of Snowflake, because I talk a couple times about there is data warehouse and there is data lake, and data lake complementary to data warehouse. In some cases, we can get extra benefits from this, but the Snowflake, it is combined data lake and data warehouse. That's one of the main difference for Snowflake data warehouse. This is another picture. So the Snowflake available on Google Cloud, AWS, and Azure. And the good thing, so it's a kind cloud neutral product. So it means you can run your Snowflake whatever you want, whatever you're comfortable, and it can grab data from any of the cloud vendors, and you can integrate the services among all those cloud vendors. And this is the Snowflake architecture, really short slide, and I mark some of the key benefits for Snowflake. First of all, we talk about SMP versus MPP versus when you have, for example, one machine, one server versus like you have cluster of servers. And the Snowflake, they call it multi-cluster and shared data. So it's combine SMP and MPP. What they mean by this? So the storage layer, our data lake, or where all the data will be stored, it is a kind the single one. So it's kind of SMP, so the single storage for all data. But the compute layer, it is MPP. So we can run different virtual machines and they all can read from the single storage. And I think one of the benefits with Snowflake, you can track your costs down to the second. So, and if you don't need to run any queries, you can just shut down, or it will be automatically terminated. So you don't pay. You don't have any running queries. You don't pay it at all. So yeah, this is software as a service thing. We covered what does it mean software as a service, and then it's relational. That is really cool because SQL is a kind of like the main language for data analytics for BI. So it's really cool. You can query terabytes of data, even petabytes of data, just using the SQL. Semi-structured means you can query your semi-structured data, for example, JSON data that you can stream into your storage layer, and then you can query this data. And I will show you an example. So it's elastic because in cloud, most of the resources, one of the benefits of the cloud, elasticity. It means if you're running workload and you out of resources, it can automatically extend resources. It can increase the size. So for example, if you have the problem, someone slowed down with like really complex queries, Snowflake can automatically resize the virtual warehouse. This is how they call compute clusters virtual warehouse. They could resize it and you gain extra performance. So high availability, cost efficient, and secure. This is just a couple reference architecture. This is example of Snowflake data warehouse built in Amazon Web Services. So this is another one. This is the kind of reference architecture for Snowflake in Azure Cloud. So it's using Azure Data Factory is ETL tool. It stores the data in Azure Data Lake, and it can also use Azure Databricks for additional like processing data. So it's a big data engine, or for example, for running machine learning workloads. This is another example of reference architecture. So this is our Snowflake data warehouse, and we've got our data put in Azure Blob Storage or Data Lake, and then we can leverage Spark, for example, to run in big data processing, or we can copy data as is into Snowflake and then doing our analytics work. I even found example for IoT. So basically, yeah, you can do whatever you want with the Snowflake data warehouse. It can simplify your life in many cases, but it doesn't mean that the Snowflake is the best. So you can leverage any other cloud data warehouse and you basically can solve your problem. So it really depends on your requirements. What about Tableau? So Tableau is a partner of Snowflake with even available public dashboard. Built in Tableau, you can connect to your Snowflake cluster and it will have all your cost information. Another thing in Snowflake I will show you in the demo is a partner connect. So this is why they call it platform, because it's not just the data warehouse or database like with traditional thing, but it's more. It has integration with all those partners. So for example, you need ETL tool or you need BI tool. You can come to here, click, and you will get the cloud instance of these solution that already integrated with your data warehouse, and you can start to work. Another thing, what they also starting to do, one of the first, and I don't know any other data vendor that can give us data marketplace. One of the feature of Snowflake is data sharing. It means for some organization, it's really the winner thing. For example, I talked with one pharmacy company. They chose Snowflake because the work they do, so they generate lots of data, and then they need to share this data, and it's like terabytes of data or gigabytes of data. We need to share with their partners. So you can think how you're going to share like terabytes of data in secure way, especially if it's some medical data. So it's not easy. But the Snowflake solved this problem with data sharing. So it's the big feature, and it's data sharing. So basically, you can share your copy of the data with external organization in secure way, and they can get access to your data, but they're gonna pay for the query. So they don't need to copy your data physically. They will just get the access to this data, and they can run the queries. They can do something with this, and I will show you couple examples with what does mean the sharing data. That is like terabytes of data that living outside of my Snowflake instance, but I have access to this. And this is example for health data. For example, some businesses, they can get benefits for leveraging epidemiological data about COVID cases, or recently weather data, some open financial data. And it's especially cool if you're running some global business and you can see how different regions or geographical locations react to your product, and you can combine additional data for your data science models. Yeah, this is the Snowflake WI that we'll check soon. This is how it connected to Tableau. So in the same way as any other data warehouse, you just create new connection, give the server, and then password and username. The one thing that I would like to talk briefly about, okay, then we work with Tableau with always options for live, extract, or custom SQL. And what I found that BI teams, they really like to use custom SQL. So because it's fast and efficient, but I think I just against this, trying to avoid using custom SQL because it's just the hard-coded logic that will stay there forever. And you couldn't really leverage any of the Tableau data source features and benefits. So then you have options for live or extract. And what I found for if extract is convenient because you can create extract, you can cache your data once a day, and then everyone will come and query this data. But it will work for maybe, I don't know, 100 millions of rows, 50 millions of rows. But if you have really huge data set, then you definitely need to leverage the live connection. This is just my advice. Depends on your size. If it's reasonable one, extract is very good. But if it's really huge, then even not trying extract, because probably it will fail to refresh your extract or create. In another case that I will show you, the query semi-structured data. The semi-structured data, it's JSON, Avro, Org, Parquet, XML. So this is the data that has the structure. And Snowflake introduced the new data type, the variant. So it's a kind of like array data format. And this is just example. So this is my JSON file, city coming into JSON file. So like several elements here. And I can query this JSON on the fly, and I can extract the JSON elements and put them into flat table. I even can work with the nested data structure. The time travel, this is also was new introduced by Snowflake, but also this available in Databricks, Delta Lake. The idea here, because as we said, the cloud storage is cheap. You can store your data, like create a kind of like snapshots of your data. And by default, Snowflake has this time travel on, and it means it will save all snapshots of the data. And if you, for example, did something wrong, For example, if you drop the table in traditional way, if you drop the table, there is no way back. So you need to create the table or get out of the backup. In Snowflake, you can run undrop command. So it's basically will look in the past and see, does this table exist in snapshot that was created before? Or for example, you can change your ETL, change the logic. So if you change the logic in ETL, your metric affected in the wrong way. So you can query in the past, you can query your metric, but see what was the value yesterday and compare result. So it gives you ability to check your history of the data as is. And then of course you can set those things, how often you want to do this, but this is just a very nice feature. And the data sharing, this is the what I talked about this. And I will show you in the demo too. Zero copy cloning, this is also very good. You can think about this. For example, you have one environment. This is your production, and your task is to create your development environment out of your production environment. So typically, it sounds like you need to physically make the copy of your database, like complete copy. And if you have, for example, once I had the case with Redshift, it was very simple task to create the copy of production environment. And it took for me a couple days because I need to create a backup of my production. Then I need to create new cluster out of production. So it was really complicated. And it was really complicated to sync them because I need to do this over and over. Zero copy cloning allows us to create copy of the data, even like, doesn't matter the size, instantly, because we'll create the logical database, and then we can start query this. In case if we'll change something, we'll get this data change only for our copy. But the default data is this. If you never work with those things, it's hard to understand. That's why if you just thinking about, okay, what else I can learn or try? So I encourage you just to go to Snowflake, sign up the cluster. It's free for first month. It's free for the first month, and it's good to try just for overall understanding. And now I can go to the demo portion of my, so I create the new cluster. It has this link. Yeah, I have around 10 minutes, and I will try to show you the quick demo. So this is UI, and it's our SQL interface. It has like databases, so I create new databases. It has the shares. It has data marketplace, where we can pick up any data we like. And it has the partner connect. So here we can choose any of solution. For example, I used before Matillion ETL, and yeah, I need to switch to another role, and then I'm able to launch it. And this is got marketplace, so I can choose any data I like, and then I can see how I can use this data. I think the Snowflake published a really nice use case, how one of the chain of cafe leverage the weather data to improve their business and business operations. Okay, so if I go here, and this is my example with Superstore data. Okay, how to run it. So what I'm doing here, so this command is just create the new database. Then I can check, okay, what's my current database and my current schema. So it's already there. Then I create the table. So yesterday I create the table. So just the really Superstore table, very simple one. And then I can take the data that was living in my AWS account in S3. So I put the CSV file that we have in Tableau sample, and here I can create the stage. So the stage, this is the place where we can land the data before it will push down into Snowflake. This is, then I talk about ETL versus ELT. So we need to create stage as a kind like landing zone where we want to put our files and then we can push them into Snowflake. Very simple. So in this command, what it's doing, it's basically taking my table. No, it's just to create the stage. So it's create the stage just to, you can build the bridge between Snowflake and my S3 storage where I have all files. So then I can create the virtual warehouse. So this is the virtual machine. And I can use the SQL commands, or I can just go here and I can create here the virtual machine. So this is the computing cluster. If I want to run any queries, anything, I need to create the virtual warehouse. And this is what for we pay. So then computing is running, we pay. Then it's not running and your virtual machine is down, you not pay for anything. Right now, because I started the command, run the command, my virtual machine is active and I'm starting paying. But right now I'm in trial, so I think I have $400 for free. I can check what is my current warehouse. Yeah, it doesn't like hashtag, but it supports hashtag, but it never work in the query when I run this. Yeah, it's my warehouse, this one. So, and Snowflake gives you warehouse size and t-shirt size. Every next size is twice bigger than the previous one. So, and this is the copy command. What this command did, it's takes my file and load this inside the table. So as a result, I should have them all data. I just did it yesterday. Okay, that something not exist. Let me run it all together. Yeah, so something, yeah, I know what is not working. It's my key. I need to specify my key here. Or even I can just skip this step. And run again. Yeah, sorry, something doesn't work. Okay, there's my stage. I don't need this. Now I can copy the data. Yeah, its data is loaded. I load it and there's number of rows. And now I can query this. Yeah, this is my data. So it doesn't matter what kind of data warehouse you work. You always need to first somehow put your data into the cloud, in the cloud storage, or in case of Snowflake, it's stage. So my data is living inside AWS, and then I built the bridge between my AWS account using my access key and secret key, and then I can say take this file and put inside this table. Of course, the schema should be matched. The JSON example is different. In this case, I create the table, home sales, and I create the file format. I said explicitly that I'm going to use the JSON type. And then again, here I use the example. So I create another stage using my file format JSON. So I define this is my how my file looked like. And then I did the copy command. But here I could use the functions that will take fields out of my JSON file. Does not. Okay. Again, I don't want to run this because I need to change all of this. And also I will share all commands they here. So if anyone decide to actually try them out, so they can do this. This example was about Parquet. So Parquet is, this is example of the data. So all those files, they also here like Parquet, JSON and Superstore CSV. So that they're here. Also create the table, empty table, define the file format, create the new stage, and then I could again refer to my Parquet format and able to load the data. This example is about shared data. So if you look here, this is my database that I create inside my cluster. But also you can see, oh, we have the Snowflake sample data, and there are different schemas with different data. This is the weather data, and this is almost near real-time weather data worldwide. And you can see some tables, like the biggest one is 20 gigabyte, oh, it's 600 gigabytes, 400 gigabytes. So quite big one. And those tables, they could be even bigger. Yeah, they 400 gigabytes. So those big data sets, and it's copy of the data is basically sharing copy of the data that living outside of my instance, and I have access to this. And the same, and my last example here is the COVID data. I use the marketplace, and what I did, I used this star schema data. I just attach it to my cluster, get the access, and now I was able to run. Yeah, I need to, every time then you start doing anything, you need to choose the database, what database you're using, and make sure that you have computing resource. So I drop the pay. It's not all of it. Yeah, I'm not sure right now why I don't have the access to those things, because yesterday it worked for me fine, but now I just don't have time to troubleshoot this. The idea was that I create the table inside my database, and then I query the data, this COVID data, wage or time series that's available for me, because it's basically from marketplace. I attach to my cluster and able to query this data, and I run the query and copy this data inside my table physically. So my last thing, what I want to show you, is to connect to the Tableau. So let me run, stop sharing this and start sharing my Tableau workbook. So this is Tableau workbook, where we can pick up the Snowflake connection. And then here I pick up my Snowflake connection. I choose my warehouse. So this is the virtual machine that will run my SQL queries. I choose the database, the schema, and the table. So let's try to see, do we get any data? Yeah, we get the data. All the same. Now we have live extract. And this is example. This is our superstore that refers to spreadsheet. Yeah, this is just sample spreadsheet. And what we can do, we can basically swap replace with the Snowflake one. So, and it means if I go here, yeah, data is changed because I have different version, pretty old. But the idea here that now I switch my report querying the Snowflake, and I can start to doing anything here, and every interaction will send the data to the Snowflake. So if I go to history, and you can see this is my last query, and it has even query tag that it was running out of Tableau. So those queries, since I opened my Tableau data source, start doing something, and then I switch to the Tableau data source, all my views updated. So that's all for me for today. Sorry for issues that I got while I ran the demo. Yes, it was working. Unfortunately, I need to cancel because I have another meeting. But if you have any questions, you can send me them to LinkedIn, or yeah, happy to follow up. And I will provide the Git and the presentation to organizers shortly after my meeting. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dmitry. I really appreciate you taking the time. And Tableau will be, they have provided us gifts for our speakers, so I'll send that to you after the meeting.
Oh, nice. Thank you very much. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Sorry if that seemed a bit rushed, you guys, but we had a couple of people who had a very tight schedule to keep. So I see, Carter, you've got a question. I don't know if you are able to find Dmitry on LinkedIn, but you might be able to just poke him there for your answer.
So I do want to thank Tableau again for supporting the user group and helping with the logistics of the virtual meeting and providing the e-learning subscription for our draw today, and also providing this Tableau store credits for the speakers. Each one of the speakers will be receiving that credit, which we'll send out afterwards. And I'll also put in the chat window a link to the Tableau store if anybody is interested in perusing some of that material. And I'll hand it over to Fuyo to address our draw now before we continue on with our next speaker.
Hey guys, so we do have a draw. We had a whole introduction and stuff planned, but then the scheduling got a bit tight, so we just decided to jump straight into the presentations. But Tableau did offer us a 1-year subscription to their e-learning platform that we can give away to people who are at our meeting today. So I was gonna do some kind of fun activity, but now I think I'm just gonna have you guys drop your name in my little form here. So if you check the chat, I'm just gonna paste a link to my Google form. And all I'm asking is for you to put your name in there, and then during the next presentation, I'll run a random number generator and pick a number out of the hat, basically. So if you want to be entered, put your name in there. And I think what I'll ask is once you're done, maybe post something to the chat. Tinkle and I were talking about this just the other day about where would you rather be right now. So if you could choose an activity other than being stuck in your basement or office or wherever, what would you choose? I know what Tink and I would both choose. Okay, so did you these can just come in while you keep on going if you want, Tink? Is that all right?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. I also during our next presentation, I'm also going to add some other content to the chat window with regard to how to contact the user group. So look for that. And then after Carter's presentation, then we'll do our random draw and we'll provide a little bit more information about the group itself. And again, thank you all very much for taking the time this afternoon to attend our meeting. It's your involvement that helps us to, keep this community going and to be able to offer these presentations. So thanks again. We really do appreciate that. So without further ado, let's introduce Carter Edie from Chatters Limited Partnership, and he's going to talk to us today about data change management.
Thanks, Tank. Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. There's no issues. You're good? Tank, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can
Okay.
hear you.
Yeah, with these wireless headphones and earbuds, you never know when they're going to lose power. And I think I've got lots, but just in case, always just kind of shout out if I do lose connectivity. Appreciate being able to come back. And sorry, I'm reading all the comments in the chat as well, and I agree with almost all of them, except for, no, I agree with all of them. I appreciate coming back and being able to give another presentation. The first one I gave was fairly technical about 1.5 years or 2 years ago, and that was one that was done in person. I've moved on and changed to a different role at a different job now, but the presentation I'm going to give today is a little bit more on kind of the psychological side of what we do in data. And if you've ever had a problem or a challenge or a roadblock in our corporate speak of trying to get adaptation of your Tableau resources or your Tableau desktop or dashboards or any of your visualizations, how maybe there's some psychological component that exists in that. And I'm just going to jump right into my presentation. Okay, and it really comes down to not just building data visualizations or data flows or data streams. A lot of Dmitry's presentation revolved around the data flow process and where we can store our data and how we can access it and how we can use it relatively quickly and efficiently. And I'll have a lot of conversation. I think I'm going to have a pretty good conversation about him later on, because I think our organization and where I'm at is still stuck in that ELT process that he was saying from a couple decades ago, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot of organizations that are in that same boat. But really, when we're building data solutions, whether or not that's a visualization that we hope that some users or data users or analysts are going to use to gain further insights, or if we're just trying to produce some overall aggregate dashboards that are going to be used for presentation within management teams, or just understanding kind of the overall where our organizations exist and where we sit relative to previous years, especially now when we're considering current versus previous year. There were a lot of organizations that were kind of shut down at this moment. So how can we do proper analysis of where we sit currently with, say, sales or with product flows or something like that, compared to previous time periods? How do we build sustainable data solutions within the Tableau universe? And as I said before, it's going to be kind of more of less of a technical talk and more about just kind of a context talk. So what I've got up here is just kind of a rough image, or just an artistic interpretation of different types of data. And you and I might see this and start counting the number of yellow circles, or we might want to decompose this into each one of the pixels of what color is represented, and then do a histogram based off of the different color regimes. But somebody else might see this from a different context and say, well, how is this representative of customer segmentation? Or somebody else might have a completely different viewpoint of how to view this type of imagery. And what I'm going to start off with is I'm just going to talk about a little story about a guy named Frank, who I met when I started working at WestJet. And I had been at WestJet for probably a couple of months, and he was tasked with building a KPI report to deal with individual flight exceptions, so flights that were not fitting the trend to be identified by revenue analysts for pricing actions. So things that maybe were outside of the norm or outliers in terms of future flights. And he thought about the business case, and he thought about what KPIs would be necessary and which stakeholders would be involved. He went through the data discovery phase and figured out which pieces of data he needed to bring together to build a custom transformation flow that could be automated. He produced a minimum viable product that could be brought to the stakeholders and start to look at. The stakeholders were brought in to look at it, to review, to critique, to analyze, and then iterations were produced off of that. And then he produced this. He published up this data store or this dashboard that he was very proud of. He had worked for a couple of months on it and thought that he really nailed this project for the request, not only the request from what the stakeholders needed, but was really going to be able to produce some really useful insights to be able to action on. But what happened was a couple months later, because he knew the data administrators at the server administrators at WestJet, he went and asked about what was actually happening with the data source, and it turned out to be nobody was actually accessing the data. Nobody was accessing the dashboard and using it at all. Maybe a couple of instances of views, but no one was actually actioning any items off of it. So who do you think has said that 70% of change management projects have failed? And I'll get into the definition of what change management is in a couple of slides here. But this comes up a lot in the change management space of when you're trying to introduce new big changes within an organization. It's been cited that 70% of them have failed to some degree, and it turns out that experts are the ones that say that. And this is constantly referenced back to one particular book that wrote on this subject that did a survey of where 70% of change management projects that are initiated end up in failure. And just like many of our data initiatives, the most important thing to take into consideration when talking about whether or not a project fails or succeeds is the context of what actually that project is and how it's adopted or how it's viewed by different people within the organization. So what this actually meant is when they looked at the results of their survey, it's not that 70% of initiatives succeeded or failed. It wasn't binary. It's that they weren't total successes. It wasn't considered by the people that were adopting it or the people that were producing them or reviewing them or critiquing them, that they were total home runs. If it wasn't considered a home run, that everything everything that was asked for or requested was adopted and useful, it was considered a failure. But let's reframe that. Instead of looking at 70% of initiatives were not home runs, that means that 60% of them were somewhere in between a base hit and a home run. So something that you could build off of, or you could iterate out and produce new or different results later on down the road. In reality, only 10% of the actual instances were strikeouts. So 10% were complete failures, 30% were complete successes, but 60% fell kind of in the middle. Somewhere it was between a total failure or a total success. And so this was all reviewed by the Harvard Business Review in an article of theirs, and I've got the link in that I can send out later if people want to read that particular paper. It's called "Organized Change is Hard," and this was published a couple of years ago. So things have probably even changed even more now that we're focused so much more on the data aspects and bringing data solutions to our users within organizations. So where we think about data constantly. About the ELT process or delivering it to stakeholders or how to organize it into beautiful Tableau visualizations and dashboards and how to get them out, how to distribute them to our users. We also have to take into consideration what these projects are in another context. The people behind them that are going to be using them, the groups within our organizations, the divisions, how the leaders view the requests or the reports and what their needs are. And the organizational context as well. And that really kind of breaks down in each one of those levels into their habits, their routines, and their norms of how they go about their daily jobs, what their routines are within their daily jobs, how they view the reports, and what their needs and accessibility is for each one of those. So what change management theory is, and this is something that comes out a lot in business schools, and there's a lot of different seminars. It's something that is universally recognized across the business world. It's the process organizations launch to improve current performance, seize new opportunities, or address key issues. In effect, it's how do you institute a change within an organization, but don't just institute it, but have it be successful as you go through the different processes. And it really kind of breaks down to the plans that are used to adapt the change, the projects that are required for the change, or that need some change implemented to it, and the initiatives to get those changes in place. So what we need to think about, not just in the data side when we're instituting new things with data changes or data responses, but address and think about the human side of change. And one of the key components that comes across all data change management theories and instances of application are the communication to the employees from leadership or from those that are trying to institute change. So constant communication is a crucial pillar. So in the change management world, there's kind of there's a bunch of different models that have been implemented in the theory space. I mean, as I said before, it's taught in business schools. There are executive seminars that exist. There's even a change management certification that you can now get. But there are kind of four main models that I want to talk about that, again, are taught in kind of business schools, but that we can adapt and implement certain aspects of those models to think about how we can get our data initiatives more adopted within the organization, or more used, or more recognized. And I'll go through each one of these, but they kind of take, again, different contexts or different perspectives of how you would approach a change. The Cotter's model looks at employee experience responses. The McKinsey 7S model, implementation of impact, or how things are actually going to be responded to by impact. The ADKAR model is looking at the identification of gaps within the change process, and how do you fill those, or how do you look at those for bridging them. And then the Kubler-Ross 5-stage model, it's the employee reaction response. When we get to that one, I think people will be a little bit more familiar of that, because it's something that we talk about when we're talking about grief and overcoming grief, or adopting to that. But like, if you were thinking about what an actual example would be for a Cotter's model, you might think for like lean initiatives when you talk about command centers, for instance, or the McKinsey model, if you're going to implement a new CRM process into your IT or a point of sale, you'd look at each one of those stages of structure and so forth. You might look at working groups to identify industry best practices, or employee information sessions. Those are all types of initiatives that are more personalized, or actual real world examples of how we implement some of these models. So what's the Cotter's model? Cotter's model was cultivated over 4 decades by Dr. Cotter. So all of these models are well established. They've been in use and implemented for many decades. So they've got a lot of good real world applications behind them. And they're based off of the observations of leaders. This particular one, the Cotter's model, is based off of observations of leaders and organizations that have attempted to transform or execute strategies. And it's really refining a methodology into key success factors. They focus on creating a sense of urgency, building a guiding coalition, and I'll dive into a few more of these details later on in the presentation. Form a strategic vision, enlist a volunteer army, enable actions by removing barriers, generate short-term wins, and that's actually one of my favorites, is to make sure that when you achieve a certain level of success with a new project or a new change initiative, always celebrate the successes and celebrate it with the people that you're working on a team with. sustain acceleration, and then finally institute change. With the McKinsey 7S model, and you'll notice that it's everything of the 7S's starts with an S in this case. Again, introduced in the 70s by McKinsey consultants who wanted to develop a framework that was easy to remember and easy to implement within any size of organization. And it's a framework that maps out the interrelated factors that influence an organization's ability to change. So no one is more important than the other, but if there are gaps that are associated with any one of the particular ones, then you might need to have McKinsey come in and discuss how to best address that gap. So the first one would be strategy of change, structure within the organization, systems that the organization already has in place, or any gaps that might exist, shared values within an organization, style, and the staff capabilities, along with the skills, not only at the organizational level, but at, say, an IT level, or at, say, at an accounting level or something like that. And then for the ADKAR model, it's viewing through a different lens than maybe a system lens and a very organizational structural lens that the McKinsey model might have, but this is more for viewing through the change through how actions are driven to identify the gaps within the process, such as training, or why do we communicate, or who do we need to see executive support a change, or why do we train people, those types of things. So the first thing to look at is the awareness of need for change. How well is the organized set up to desire the participation and support for the change? Knowledge within the organization of how to actually change. So how the specific planning steps, the specific process steps, and how you need to achieve each one of them, and what the goals are to achieving them. Once change has started to be implemented, this is kind of along the same lines of that sustaining acceleration. It's reinforcement to sustain the change, not just let it kind of drive off. Oops. Oh, sorry. Go back to this one. Yeah, and the reinforcement of, to sustain the change. How well can the organization actually keep up with the new models and new techniques that they're trying to implement? And the Kubler-Ross model is more of one that comes from an emotional standpoint. It's also known as the change curve. So we might recognize this as what are the different stages of grief that you go through when something happens, particularly when there's a death or there's a major change or a major trauma to kind of your continuity of daily life or routine. And this is actually, we go through the step of denial first, shock, anger, bargaining, depression, finally acceptance, and then commitment to the change. And we actually, we recognize this on an individual level, but to a certain extent, when you're going through an overall change within an organization, each one of these comes up in different instances, or maybe different manifestations within different groups, depending on how ingrained individuals are with their current roles or their current routines, or how adaptable perhaps an organization is. And there's actually something called the Valley of Despair, which exists when you're starting to implement change within an organization through this stage. What the y-axis here would be your enthusiasm for change, and then the x-axis would be how long the time period is out from when the initial change, when you started to implement those new processes or something. And this Valley of Despair is where a lot of people kind of get sucked in, and there's a lot of energy that's required to get you back out over this hump. And so if we take that in the context of who we are as data professionals within organizations, a lot of us focus in on the application of Tableau and building of visualizations and dashboards, but each one of a data professional, I want to call it, faces this different kind of battles that they need to address and overcome. And for accessibility to the data, we have data architects, people that build our systems in the background, the data warehouses, the data lakes, the data lake houses in the Snowflakes and the Azure and even the SQL or MySQL worlds. When it comes to data availability, we have our engineers that have to build the different data sets and transform them together and get them to a point where they're accessible for users to have on a regular basis, maybe whether or not that's a time period regularity or an availability of consistent sustainable data. We have the data delivery, which is of the developers. We have data visibility, which are the analysts, the people that create the visualizations or disseminate or distribute the data accessibility points. We have peculiarity, which is, I would say, data scientists kind of look into. They start to dive into the data once all of these other pieces of the foundation have been built together. But one thing that we don't focus too much on within our organizations, I think it's kind of not necessarily formalized into a particular formal role or explicit role within our organization, is strategy. And that's something that I like to call a data translator. And a lot of time that data translator role does fall on to people that are leaders within our organizations, but it's not a formalized role. And data translator really does need to take into consideration things like context or things like how we change viewing our data within an organization, and be able to take and guide people through not only understanding what each one of the pieces that an architect, an engineer, a developer, an analyst have to do, but also how does that fit within the broader scheme of our businesses, and how does that fit within the context of business decisions, and what's good for understanding where we are and how we perceive the data. So let's go through a particular example of what kind of change management context we can look at when we're looking at a specific example. So, a business leader comes to us, not so much anymore because that was last year, but say hypothetically last year, we had a manager come to you and say, we need to build a COVID sales recovery dashboard. If you were to view this through part of the ADKAR model and say the awareness, you could just go out and find all the data you need, bring it all together, and produce a dashboard that you find visually appealing, and you think that there's a lot of great insights that you gather from it. But you also have to consider, how have the users changed throughout throughout something like a pandemic, like a shock event of the pandemic? How are people accessing the data? But how have the business operations actually changed due to the pandemic? So how is it different than normal routine and habits? This is a good point to discuss and document these topics extensively in the initial stages of the project. So within the IT world, and as I've kind of switched more over into the data engineering space from maybe the data analyst or data building, visualization building space, is there are lots of data management tools that provide a good foundation or basis for building out stories of how a project is going, what stages a project's at, and what resources are necessary for continuing on with the project. And establishing a regular or weekly check-in meeting where people can talk about it and talk about maybe discussion about what project things might have pivoted, what requirements exist, and how those are being adapted within a data project is pretty useful. It comes back to that employee communication aspect that I talked before about being a major pillar. So let's talk about the Cotter. Let's take an example from building a guiding coalition. So for your data project, you would identify managerial or technical leaders with a vested interest, people that are actually interested in what's happening with COVID, that they can volunteer their time a little bit to give you feedback on what they see or what their perspective is of what would be useful for the organization, or maybe other data sets that they've found that they see, have happened upon on their free time. But it's also important to say who wants to be seen in the project and who actually wants to engage. So you can throw out within these regular weekly check-in meetings with the stakeholders within the organization, you can ask who would like to be involved with helping me build or helping me to see the data or check the data or understand what visualizations might be important for the data and the stakeholders. But you also have to kind of validate who wants to be included in the project just to be seen in the project, but who also actually physically is willing to engage and help. And a good way to do this is to internalize, use internal communications tools. I know with COVID, we're kind of all using this because we all kind of work from home for the most part. We're all really focused on communications through things like Slack or Teams or like I said before, Jira or Asana. But really getting used to and mastering those tools is a big part of the communication to find those that can help us push our projects along. If we look at such a project through the McKinney 7S model, which teams and tasks take priority during development? What are the authoritative relationships and decision complexities within an organization? If you're relatively new to a role or relatively new to a job, then you might need to lean on an organizational chart even, or get to know what the power network is within an organization by asking peers or people that have been there for longer, 10 years or more experience within the organization, who is asking for a lot of requests, but at the end of the day, there's another person within the power structure who may or may not be in a higher part of the organizational leadership who will end up making the final decisions. That can save you a lot of time and effort when you're building out some of these reports. If you spend a lot of time answering requests for certain individuals, but at the end of the day, they may or may not be overridden by another decision later on. And then if we look at the Kubler-Ross model, how does bargaining play into us developing these programs? And as the number of stakeholders grow, so does the number of asks. Again, we get into these stakeholder engagements, environments where multiple people are asking for how much more they can give. And then you kind of get overwhelmed by something like project creep into what the actual initial requirements are. So always being able to cycle back to what the initial requests are. So what we can do here is we can highlight what's crucial, what's needed, what is a want, and what is a wish for a particular project, and explicitly lay that out near the beginning or in the intermediate stages of developing a project. It's this internal bargaining and pushing the bargaining stage back on to the stakeholders for end users of the eventual product. And a good way to really identify that at the beginning of a project is to produce a standardized or develop a standardized project kickoff template and use that whenever there's a new request that comes in. Not only to hone in on what the request might be and ask the crucial questions to refine down what will actually be valuable for the end users, but also to circle back to it. And I don't particularly like using terms like that, but circle back to a formalized document in case project creep starts to come into a specific development. So I've talked a lot about the theories behind project change management and in the context of data change management. How are companies like Tableau starting to build off of this? And I think it's pretty neat to see Tableau come out with a couple of initiatives recently, particularly the blueprint and the data playbook, that really kind of coalesce around these ideas of how do you install and grow a data culture, and how do you implement sustainable data changes within an organization. And I would suggest if you haven't looked into the blueprint, or you haven't looked into the data change or data culture playbook, give them a read. I mean, it's relatively quick. They're relatively well distilled into probably a 10 to 20 minute read of each one of them. I think the playbook is a white paper, but they go over in detail each one of the stages within, in particular, the blueprint. How do we develop different structural components within an organization that are pillars to be able to lean on for when we need to go through the data change process, or the new data development process, or the new dashboard or report request development? And for instance, with the blueprint, the tagline is prescriptive, repeatable, and proven results. So they're already thinking about how to implement some of these data change management techniques into a Tableau wrapped kind of initiative. And then with the data culture playbook, it's how do you create tools that, again, are you build them, you keep them running, but then you also adapt and you adopt them for other uses later on. How do you think about, within an organizational context, building a data set that is sustainable, but also adaptable to other cases and other needs, maybe perhaps within other parts of the organization? And how do you access that? And how do you keep it monitoring? So a big component of that is getting leadership and aligning leadership metrics on board with business priorities to build data solutions, or what's the data source that's going to address critical decision points within the organization, and how do you focus in on that and get other people on board? How do you gain the trust within the leadership structure? How do you think about how an organization is already established or set up for decision making? So one of the tools that I use actually quite a bit in my job for communicating and visually communicating data is this is an example, like actually Dmitry showed before, of a traditional ELT or ETL process. You extract data from different data sources, you transform it through a process, whether or not that's written code, and then as a SQL Server process flow, or an Azure data factory, or even Tableau Prep. And then you load it into a different database or a different target, whether or not that's a UI front end or a report, an aggregated report, or even Excel. So this is traditionally what you would throw up on an ETL project flow chart within a presentation if you were going to give it to management and say, these are the steps that we have to go through. We have to look at each one of these stages. But what I really like about Tableau Prep is you start to develop a flow that's a visualization queue. So for instance, you can actually show to your stakeholders or show to the users that are going to be the end users of this particular project that you're working on. You can show them the different steps and what it actually means. So here, we're going to aggregate the data together after we've cleaned it. We're going to join it back to a particular data set, and then we're going to actually write out specific commands that will give you a new data field that will be in your new data source that you can then leverage off of to build your analysis or build your visualizations. So I find it a really, really good to always communicate in one of the best ways that we can as humans is through the visual component. And Tableau Prep does a really good job of creating an ability to show our transformation flows with data. Another way to start to implement from the Tableau sense is organizations all have a very specific style or have styles that have built up over time. And a good way that Tableau really kind of allows us to leverage that is to look at things like going out and getting a particular color palette within an organization. Here's the color palette for chatters from the brand guideline. You can implement very specific customizable things like this within Tableau, because it gives you a lot of options to be able to do that. The fonts as well, bringing in different fonts and different color schemes and different the setups, really important, because not only does it allow you to standardize your reporting structure within an organization, it also creates a common ground with the most people within the organization who maybe aren't really focused on data can see and immediately connect with. If you're in the marketing department and you've been used to using a particular font, a particular color scheme for a very long time, all of a sudden your data is coming to you in a visual form that matches what you've been doing for your whole professional career at that particular organization. Then you've got a confidence already. There's an immediate click in that you are similar. You're doing similar things. You're sharing common ground. And another thing is matching up logos and other visualizations or graphics that exist, incorporating them into your data visualizations, not just producing the standard, as great as there are, the standard Tableau 10 data colors for producing visualizations. Having some sort of standardization, not just with your report templates, but also with color scheme, fonts, and visualization components. Another thing that I really like to focus on is visualizing short-term wins. So we talked a little bit about that, about celebrating as one of the key components of kind of change management and communicating your short-term wins. There's a bunch of little features in Tableau that can really have big impacts that I find are really useful when I talk to users and get feedback on particular reports that I've produced. And a big one that I don't know how many people utilize them or how many people actually implement them, but when you're editing titles of spreadsheets, you can take a lot of the metadata that exists within a data set and start to implement them. So by clicking on this little insert button, a big one that I like to use is the data update template. So we have data sets that are updated on a daily basis every morning. And our users want to be confident that the data that they're getting is the most refreshed data. We have plans to go to an hourly data update. So they'll want to be able to see and make sure that their extracts they're looking at from the server, from the Tableau server, are the most up-to-date that they have. So just being able to implement the data update time is a nice little visual cue that gives users of the data that confidence. And so here's the output of how it would look. You've got your sheet name, which I call data title options, where the data source is actually coming from for this one. So the point of sale data, when the data update time was last, and then whoever the username just adds a little bit more of a personal touch as well. So they can see their name associated with whatever visualization or whatever subscription you're sending out on a subscription basis. Another nice little option that looks at that customization and kind of fits back in with the color palettes or the color scheme is being able to produce standardized color palettes that anybody that's developing reports within Tableau can use. And so within the preferences document or the preferences text file that comes with your My document or My Tableau repository, you can actually implement customized color palettes. So for instance, with Tableau or with Chatters, there's the customizable Chatters palette. And so anybody that's building a visualization can actually look at each one of those colors and pick them automatically and know with confidence that that's part of the brand guidelines, so I can use them and it fits with our theme and our style at Chatters. And the other one that I've implemented and had a lot of success with for building confidence in the data visualizations and the data consistency is to include little, let's call them data warning flags within data sets. Maybe it's a different worksheet within a set of worksheets or a set of reports, but it just gives an indication of whether or not the data was loaded. And you can do this all through parameterization and building calculated fields. It's all very customizable, very quick and very easy, where if the data has been loaded within a certain period of time, you say, well, how many rows were added within the last 5 or 6 days? How consistent is that compared to the previous days? Does that fit with the pattern, for the week of whatever day of the week it was for the data to go in? All these little things might seem like small one-offs, but when you add them all together and you provide confidence of the results to the users, they all of a sudden don't question or aren't asking a ton of questions about the data flow or the plumbing of your data, and they can focus more on their jobs of gaining insights. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. We just had a couple questions about update time. Where are you grabbing that from? There's just some questions about where to.
Oh, sure. When you do a title, when you go into, let me see if I have an example here. When you go onto a worksheet, let me grab this and I'll just go here. Okay. So here in Tableau, I've got a brand new worksheet. I want to look at count. So let's look at my sales. And if I go, sorry, it's got to reconnect. There we go. If I go to my sheet number 2, if I just go to my title and I want to look at sheet number 2 here. So it automatically populates as the sheet name whenever you have the title of your particular worksheet. If you go to insert, you've got actually a bunch of options, not only all of your parameters that you put in here, plus the whatever measures you've already attributed to the worksheet, but you also have things like page count. So what page is it within your worksheets, within your dashboard, data source name, but the data update time. So what this is a meta timestamp of the data that you're accessing. So if you have a live connection, it'll be the last time that live connection was published. Or in our case, if you're refreshing an extract, whether incrementally or fully refreshed on a Tableau server, it's the last updated extract refresh time.
Nice. And that's in the title object.
That's all in the title object, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
I mean, you can recreate it using parameters, which I've done before in the past, and whatever the latest refresh date is of, say, your particular data at a row level. But this is just really easy to use.
Yeah, that's great. That's very handy.
Okay, so cancel off of that. And then another thing that we can do is include actionability within an or within our visualizations. Does anybody ever remember Clippy? It'll date the young people from the old people here within the organization.
Oh my God! Wanted to kill that little paperclip.
There's a lot of strong feelings about this paperclip. For people who don't know who Clippy is, it was a guide, a helpful guide, if you would, that would ask you questions within Word doc, or I guess the Office suite back in, I want to say 10, 15 years ago. But if you were starting to write something, it would try to, it would try to predict what you were trying to write. And it would suggest, are you trying to write a resume? Here, let me show you resume techniques. It was like that. What we have now is kind of the brand guidelines within Word that will produce, the visualization aspect of producing a new document. But this was actually trying to spell out, guiding principles, if you will, or structure within an organization. You can do the same thing within Tableau. That's one of the really great things about the flexibility of Tableau. And this would be use the tooltips to the greatest advantage you possibly can. Make the tooltips into your own Clippy, if you will. So for instance, here on a dashboard, I've added a see original here button. So that's a button that will navigate you to a different worksheet. But when you hover over it, it'll actually tell you details about what that is. We can use these to help guide people into producing actions within a spreadsheet or within a report themselves. Get people engaged interactively with our spreadsheets. And that'll add to the stickiness of getting people to use your visualizations as well. Once they start to see that there's an interactive component to it, they'll start to click around on other parts that will say, what else can I gain insights from this? And to do this, I focus a lot on integrating things like data keys. So what does the graph actually show? So if I were to hover over this within a data sheet, and you can standardize different icons to be consistent across different reports. But if you were to hover over this, you would just have a standard JPEG of your worksheet that you've downloaded, or your dashboard that you've downloaded, that has little indicators or little annotations on it that says this part of the dashboard is based on time series from point A from time A to time B. Just give kind of visual cues of how to look at a dashboard will get people more engaged in it. A key, or producing a legend, will actually show people how to use the dashboard, what happens when you click on this functionality, what happens when you do these filters. And then I also include on some of maybe more complex dashboards, definitions. If there's a lot of business specific or industry specific definitions within a dashboard that maybe not all people within the organization will know, as well as information that exists for certain data fields. And I can show a little bit of that from another example that I have. This is more of a data set that was more of a personal pet project, but not a lot of people would know the astronomy background of how a stellar data set comes together, or what the meanings would necessarily be. So through the tooltip, I've just, and it needs to reload again. So this will take a second just because it's pretty large. Thank you, Tableau Public, for not caching. But using even just an icon that allows you to then use the tooltip to define further down specific definitions or information about each visualization will allow people to get more engaged within it. So here, I hope you can see that the tooltip come up, because sometimes I think with these Zoom meetings, Amy, can you see the tooltip come up?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. Okay. So again, you can include things that are more detailed in the definition so people can read through them and understand what each component of your dashboard is. Now, within a business sense, you probably won't need to include definitions all that often, because your users should be well versed in the definitions of the KPIs or something like that. But for other individuals, you might not need for other components that maybe it's a corporate wide aggregated data set or visualization, you can include definitions or information, allow people to gain insights, not just from their specific things they're looking for in their data sets, but also what the broader context of the visualization is trying to achieve. Okay. And as we in the data world kind of think about maybe data specifically and not necessarily the context, there was a recent book that came out that as I was scrolling through Amazon popped up as one of my recommended reads or something that I would like. Self-help reading, People Skills for Analytical Thinkers, Boost Your Communication and Advance Your Career. And this just kind of comes back to the fact that there are different ways that people think about just things in general in life. And if you've got a very analytical mindset, you put puzzle piece A together with puzzle piece B together with puzzle piece C, and it's a mathematical equation that should equal D, right? But not a lot of people that aren't necessarily analytical thinkers or think from things from a different context will not think of things in a formulaic kind of approach such as that. So being able to understand the context of how other people within our organization think about problems and issues and data issues and data solutions can really help us in adaptation of the data products that we are building. And I'll just come back, I'll circle back to this kind of mess of a data. Some people might see this as just a mess of colors, but I'd hope after this presentation, you can look at it and say there are different contexts to viewing things. And I'll actually come back to it now. That person at the beginning, Frank, that I talked about at WestJet was actually myself. And it was a really frustrating and eye-opening experience going through and building a data solution, a data project solution that I thought was going to be really useful for a lot of the analysts, and just not seeing it be adopted at all. And it comes back to a lot of the things that you would look at from a data change management perspective and context, I glossed over and didn't take into consideration while I was building that project. So I know it wasn't technically focused a lot on Tableau, but thank you for, oops, I don't want to do that. Thank you for sticking through my presentation, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
So I think that's a really excellent topic to discuss, because I think all of us have probably been in this boat where we've built some great analytical tool, but the people we built it for don't want anything to do with it. And that happens to me, not all the time, but it has happened on occasion, where you think you're building something that will help them, but people are quite mired in their existing processes, and they don't really see the benefit of changing. And so for me, change management, it's quite undervalued, but it's so important. If you're working on any kind of project that involves people, that's your biggest hurdle.
And it not just with major projects within an organization too, but even self projects, even things that you're working on the sideline. You may be doing it for your own personal goals and viewership, but there's definitely an audience component that you have to think about. I don't think in the last year there's been a particularly huge number of Tableau public visualizations that have come out about the flu, for instance. 90% of health-related visualizations that have been published in the last year have been on COVID, because that's audience demands.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Carter, for the presentation. Thanks for introducing us to the different change management techniques and how we can adapt those. And thanks for drawing attention to the blueprint and data playbook from Tableau. And I liked your comments about the battles that we face and drawing attention to the strategy and data translator. So thank you for that. And the short-term wins, visualizing those. So we really appreciate you taking the time and sharing with us this afternoon. And
I made a slide for the winner of the draw.
Oh, okay.
It's very fancy. I pulled a clever phrase from Carter's presentation. Can you see it?
Yes.
Trina Herdman. So Trina, can you privately message me your email, and we'll get the prize sent out to you. I saw that on Carter's Valley of Despair. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like a nice one.
The only place you can go is up from there.
That's true.
I also wanted to mention, everyone, before we sign off for today, if you have an interest in presenting at a future meeting, please reach out to us. And if you have any feedback on content you would like to see in a subsequent meeting, please reach out to us for that as well. We would appreciate anything that you have to offer or can contribute to the community so that we can keep these meetings going and keep engagement high. So thank you again for participating. Do you have anything further to add, Fuyo?
Oh, I just realized my camera's been off the whole time. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming out. I know it's not, it's a little bit different trying to do these over Zoom, so it's great. I mean, on the one hand, I guess it's a little bit easier. You don't have to deal with parking and whatnot. But, it's still great that everyone could join us. And yes, definitely. So we posted links to our contact information. If you're interested in doing a presentation, please get in touch. That's how we keep the meetings going. So thanks, guys. Are we good, Tink?
Yes. Have a great evening, everyone.
All right. Take care, everyone.